Alright guys, welcome back. This is part 3. What we're going to be looking to have at the end of this episode is something that resembles something like what's on the screen right now. So we have our spaceship, we can fly around, and now we're going to work on making some actual asteroids that fly around the screen, wrap around, that you can shoot and make disappear. And we're going to be looking into handling the basics of just collision, and like making it so when you collide with things, die, when bullets hit things, they die, and so on and so forth, and how to kind of shape collision masks to make things in your game feel fair and interesting. So this is what we had at the end of the last part. We just had a spaceship, we can fly around, we can shoot. It's kind of cool, but we need to actually put something into this dark, empty void of space, and we're going to make some asteroids for us to shoot at. So as we know by now, whenever we want to make like a new thing in our game, the first thing that thing usually needs is a sprite. So I'm going to close that now. I'm going to go ahead into sprites, right click, create sprite, and name the sprite SPR_Asteroid. Now this sprite's going to work a little differently to our other sprites. Our other sprites at the moment, they only have like one frame of animation each. They're just like, our player is this little triangle, our bullet is just that little square. The asteroid, we're actually going to give 3 frames of animation, but we're not going to use those frames of animation for animating. And what we're actually going to do is we're going to make different frames that contain different variations of the asteroid, so that the asteroids can look different from one another and be a different frame at random when the asteroids get made. Meaning we're going to make a sprite with animation frames, but then we're going to tell the object to sort of treat that sprite a little bit differently from just animating as it usually would. So, but anyway, first of all, in SPR_Asteroid, I'm going to go to Edit Sprite, make a new sprite, and this one's going to be 64 by 64 this time. It wants to be a bit bigger than like our spaceship and stuff like that, so it's actually like kind of collidable with. And I'm just going to make the 64 by 64 sprite. I'm just going to use the line tool really to just draw like, I don't know, any old kind of like rough asteroidy type shape. I'm going to try and keep it like kind of square and have it fill up most of the space of the 64 by 64 box, and just for collision reasons it'll make a little bit more sense later, just so we have like a very clear kind of collision shape. And because doing precise collisions is slow. I'll get into it later, but basically you just want to make sure you keep it like, you can make it jagged and stuff, but make it kind of roughly fill the space neatly. Okay, so click tick and we have 1 frame there. Now I'm going to click this button that says add an empty image at the end. Just add 2 more empty frames like that. If I take this show preview box, you can see what the animation would look like, which is just this box and then just flashing invisible, because those are the next 2 frames, right? But we don't actually need to care about that, because as I said, we're not actually using this for animation. We're just using it to store the different variations of our asteroid. So I'm going to go into the next frame now, and I'm just going to do the same thing again, just draw something that looks kind of like some sort of rock. And like, you might be asking, we've got a black background, do I even need to fill these shapes with black, you know? And technically no, I guess not, but like the reason I'm doing so is though that like when they overlap with one another, like they look like kind of solid objects and stuff like that, so I'm just filling them with black. So that's another asteroid, and then I'm going to draw a 3rd one. So yeah, I can leave little gaps in like this, but I just want to make sure I'm mostly using the space rent. Yeah, we can make that kind of pointy. Yeah. And you make these look however you want really, but I'm just trying to make them look, even though they're kind of like rough. Oops. Just now trying to make sure that they fill that space kind of cleanly. Okay, so like that. Okay, and you can see in the preview it just looks like like a little black shape kind of screwing around wanting to die or whatever. I don't know how you would describe that weird sort of black blob animation. But as I said, it's not actually going to animate, but that's how it would normally if we were using this like a regular sprite, but we're not. We just want 3 frames in here so that our asteroid object that we're about to create can pick between one of these 3 frames. So now we've made that, go ahead and click OK. And in Origin, once again, make sure you hit center here to make sure the asteroid is centered properly. And then the next thing I'm actually going to do is I'm going to modify Actually, no, I'll come back to that later. I was going to say we'll do the collision mask now, but we'll do that in a bit. So we'll go ahead and click OK here. So right click in objects now and go to create object, naming the object as per our naming convention, obj underscore asteroid. Just the same as we've done with everything else, okay? Make sure you set the sprite to equal SBR underscore asteroid, and then go ahead and add the create event, okay? So what we're going to do in the create event, the first thing we want to do is set up how this object relates to this sprite, because we're going to do it a bit differently, as I've said, than how GameMaker would normally treat the sprite. If we were to like place this object in the game now and run it, it would animate as we saw in that preview window. It would just be like crazy black blob, just sort of like shape-shifting all the time, right? Which isn't what we want. We just want to take one of those frames at random and just only have that and not animate at all. So in order to make an object not animate at all in code, so this is just a code action inside the create event, I'm going to say image underscore speed equals 0. Image speed is the animation speed of your object, okay? So it's the amount of frames that will pass per step. So at 60 FPS, which is what we set our game to in the beginning, an image speed of 1 means your object will animate 1 frame every step, so 60 frames every second, right? Whereas an image speed of 0.5 or like 1/2, for example, an image speed of half that would animate 30 frames a step at would animate 30 frames a second at 60 FPS. You see what I mean? Okay. And by setting the image speed to 0, it just means, you know, we don't animate at all. The next thing I'm going to do is pick one of those frames at random. Now, every object has this variable called image underscore index, which tracks which animation frame it's showing at any given time. By setting that to a random integer between 0 and 3, because we have, if we go back into our sprite, we have image 0, image 1, and image 2 here. It counts up from 0. We have 3 frames of animation there, so by setting image index to be iRandom, that's turned yellow because it's a function in GameMaker, open brackets 2, what iRandom does is it picks a random integer between 0 and whatever number you feed into the brackets, okay? So it's going to pick random integer between 0 and 2, so either 0, 1, or 2. So by doing that, whenever this object gets created in its create event, it stops itself from animating and just picks an animation frame anywhere between its frame 0, frame 1, or frame 2. Okay, so that's exactly what we want. In fact, if I just go ahead now and come into the room and just kind of place these around a bit, just plonk a few of them around here on each. You can see in the level editor they all have the same frame because it's just showing the first frame inside the sprite. But if I run that, you should see that they all have different shapes now. They all have like a random. They have a random one of those frames of the 3 that we created. And we could add more and turn that number higher if we wanted to make even more variations, but I think 3 is good enough for now. But obviously these asteroids don't actually do anything at the moment, they just kind of chill out here. So now we need to actually make them move around. So going back into our obj underscore asteroid now, and back into this create event, now that we've set up the image correctly, we're just going to make this asteroid fly in a random direction at a mostly random speed. So I'm going to set direction, it turns red, to equal random 360. Random, again, it just chooses a random number between 0 and whatever number you give it in the brackets. The difference between iRandom and random is random picks a real number, whereas iRandom picks an integer. Integer meaning a whole number with like no decimal places or anything like that. Real number can be can have decimal places, so like you might get something like 26.72 or something like that, okay? Different from an integer. And we're going to do the same thing with speed, turning red to equal, but because we don't want it to move at speed 0, we're going to give it a base speed, right, of 0.5 in whatever random direction we've just set ourselves up with, plus random 2, okay? So it'll equal a random speed anywhere between 0.5 and 2.5, essentially, right, okay? And that's that. So if I click the tick, click OK now, and I run that, you should see they all kind of go flying off in random directions, and then they fly off the screen and they don't come back. So now we just need to do the exact same thing we've been doing like with our spaceship to make them wrap around the screen, which is to go into Object Asteroid, add the outside room event, again in this little section called Other Little Diamond, the outside room event, and in the Move tab over here just drag in a wrap screen action. Make sure to set that to in both directions, and click OK. Again, you can do that with code, it's just easier to drag in that one simple action, okay? Click OK. Run that. Alright, so now they wrap around the screen and they move all kind of slightly random speeds, but always kind of slowish, and they will move around as we want them to. Now the next thing we need to do is just set it up so the asteroids can collide with the player and collide with the bullets and do the appropriate thing. Now whenever there's any kind of collision in this game, something basically dies, right, or something is removed. It makes things quite simple for us. So in obj_asteroid we're just going to add a couple of new collision events. The first collision event we want is with the player, so collision obj_player, and then go ahead and add another event, collision with obj_bullet, okay, because these are the two situations we're going to be covering. Now make sure you've clicked on the collide with obj_player event and go into, I think, main 2 action tab over here. I forget where all these things are, and under here where it says game, you can drag in the restart the game action. Okay, if you want to do that same thing in code, it's like, the only reason I'm using that action is because it's one line of code, but in order so that we're actually learning different lines of code that will be useful to us later on, I'll show you how to do exactly the same thing if you drag in an execute code action and just type in game_restart. Okay, turns yellow because it's a recognized function. Open bracket, close the bracket because there's no extra information we need to give it, and put a semicolon as a good habit. Okay, that will do exactly the same thing as just using that game restart action, but it's just, you know, that's the particular function that we use to restart the game if we need to. Okay, and now when an asteroid collides with a bullet, we need to do two different things. We need to destroy the asteroid and destroy the bullet that hit it. So in main 1, you can go ahead and drag in destroy the instance, a little drag and drop action, applies to self, and click OK. And then drag in another one, the little bin icon, a little recycly icon on it. Destroy the instance, and click applies to other. Okay, what applies to other means, it's something that's really only used in events that involve a collision with another object, so that when when one object collides with another object, there are obviously two objects involved, okay? The object that's causing the collision and the object it's colliding with, okay? And when you set something to apply to other, it means it's applying to the other object in that collision event, okay? So this means we're destroying the bullet, in this case, that we've just collided with, as well as destroying ourselves. Now again, we can easily do the exact same thing through code, and it's useful to do so that we learn the syntax for doing it in case we want to do it in more complicated code. So I'm going to just drag in a code action and say instance_destroy. Open bracket, close bracket, semicolon. Okay, and up here we have the exact same little ticky boxes that we had in the destroy instance drag and drop thing, where it says applies to and self, other, and object. So you can also apply to all of a specific object, but we don't want to do that. We just want to apply to the other specific instance in the collision event. Click tick, and then drag in another one, because like we have to do separate code actions for if we want to change this applies to thing up here. This one just applying to self, instance_destroy. Again, open bracket, close bracket, semicolon. Simple, right? And that's that. So if we go ahead and run that now, and if I fly into one of these spaceships, you see the game restarts. Now something you might notice here, oh, and also if I shoot them, they die just like that, okay? Now something you might kind of notice is that some of these collisions feel a little bit off. Like if I run into some of these asteroids, and if you're looking closely, you can see like the game seems to be restarting before I'm colliding with them. Now the reason for that is just the way the collision masks are currently set up. And sometimes you'll notice when bullets collide as well, they seem to like destroy the asteroid way too early, and you see like a death like that where like I'm not quite touching the asteroid, and those collisions like are the type of things players get really mad about. You know, they don't feel they feel like the game is like kind of being unfair. It's like, oh, I was nowhere near that and it still killed me. You know what's going on. So generally when it comes to collision, it's good to err on the side of hitboxes that are too small rather than hitboxes that are too big when it comes to colliding with things that can kill you, yeah? So let me go and show you how this is currently working. So if you go to SPR_Asteroid, there's our asteroid sprite here, and click this button here that says Modify Mask. Make sure Precise Collision Checking is unticked, we do not want that. Go to Modify Mask, and you can see this box comes up. You can see this like dark shaded area around the asteroid. That's the collision box of this asteroid, and you can see it sticks out of the edge because it's just trying to draw a box shape around whatever it can. Because collision detection, it's hard to do like very precisely. Like you can click this precise button here and it like melds it perfectly, pixel perfect collision like that, and that's the same thing taking that button up there, precise collision checking does. But doing that is a very bad idea just in general. Well, it's bad practice in general, and it should really only be used if you absolutely need it, because it's very, very slow to check pixel by pixel for collisions, okay? It's much, much, much faster for GameMaker to do rectangle-based collisions or circle-based collisions and so on, okay? So it's better to just do a rectangle that fits as neatly as possible than it is to do precise collision. But the problem with this rectangle, as you can see, it like sticks out of the edge like this, and it doesn't really cover the shape of well, it covers too much empty space, right, that we don't want to be able to hit. So all we're going to do is we're going to make this box smaller, okay, so that it's a bit more fair to the player. So I'll go to manual instead of automatic for this bounding box, okay? I'm just going to make this box a bit smaller. If I set this to 5, top to 5, just by changing these coordinates around a little bit. 58, that makes that a bit smaller. If I go through different frames, see it's starting to look a bit better. If I turn it up about, add 3 more pixels each side, like that. See, that's a much sort of nicer fit like that. There's like little bits sticking out, but that's okay. Like, players are generally going to forgive you, or like appreciate it even if like the sprite does technically overlap with something that should kill them, but the game lets them get away with it. It's much, much better, and players will much quicker disregard that than if they look like they haven't collided with something, but they still die, you know? So it's always better to kind of like err on this side of things, having smaller collision boxes rather than too large. Okay, so that fits fairly neatly over the top of that. Now, ooh, jeez, I didn't mean to. I accidentally just undid that. What was it? It was 8, and 55. 55. Yeah, if you click and drag over there, you can also drag the box manually, but I was inputting it like kind of precisely in here. Okay. So click OK with that. That's a better collision mask, I think, for that one. But the main thing here, I guess, is like, I don't want to edit that one too much. The main one we want to edit is going to be our player sprites collision box. So go to Modify Mask on the player sprite. You can see it's covering this huge area here where there's like nothing at all. So like if we touch like an asteroid with this corner and this corner of the player sprite, we're still going to die at the moment, which is going to be kind of rubbish for the player, yeah? So the main thing here is we're just going to make the collision box way smaller, just as we did with the asteroid. So I'm going to go to manual again. I'm going to say, left and top can, well, left can stay as it is because like all of this is perfectly fine as a collision. That's pretty tight. But we're going to reduce right to a lot less. So make that, I don't know, 24 or so. Bring top down by like 5. Bring the bottom up by about 5. And we'll have it as something like that. So it still sticks out a little bit there. Maybe we could make it more precise with a circle. I don't know. It's kind of up to you, really. But I've just made that a little bit smaller just so it feels a little bit more fair. Maybe if I bring it down a little bit more. 7, 4. So just a bit tighter in there, like that. I think ideally, I suppose I would fit it in as just this little box here, but I think that should be okay. I'm going to go ahead and click OK with that. The only collision box we don't need to worry about at all is the sprite for the bullet, because the collision box, I mean, it's tiny, but also like just because it's completely box shaped, so like it's perfectly fine and completely perfectly precise to have it like totally sharp like that, okay? Let's click OK with that. If I run the game now, we should find that those collisions are a lot tighter, like that, okay? So you have to really actually touch the asteroids now in order to die on them. And you'll find sometimes it's kind of hard to replicate, but like you'll actually get away with like overlapping them slightly, like that if you're looking really carefully. Like you can slightly overlap the asteroid sometimes and get away with it. The reason you don't want to make the asteroid ones too small is because then it'll actually make them harder to shoot. Because like you'll even notice now sometimes like it probably went a bit too small with the asteroid ones. You can see sometimes the bullets actually like go through the asteroid a little bit. And again, like players will let you off with bad hitboxes as long as those bad hitboxes favor their outcome. You know, like if the bad hitboxes lead to something that helps the player, they'll generally be okay with it. Whereas it's just annoying to the player if like, oh, that bullet clearly hit that asteroid, or oh, hey, I clearly avoided that asteroid. That's what, you know, makes a game feel unfair or unforgiving. So that's that. So now we have player flying around. We have a bunch of asteroids in the game that you can shoot. They go away, they wrap around the screen, and they kill you if you collide with them. And we've modified our collision boxes so they're a little bit more fair and fun for the player. Next time around we'll probably look at making them die in a little bit more of an interesting way, and hopefully also starting to get to the point where they spawn dynamically over time as opposed to just plonking a few around the room and then when you blow them all up, that's it. Okay, so we're starting to get there now. We have something more of an actual game starting to form. I hope you guys are enjoying the series so far. Any comments or questions or anything, just leave them in the comments below. And yeah, I'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for watching. See you guys.